The stagecoach rattled violently as it hit another rut in the well-worn trail, jolting Katherine Reed awake from her fitful slumber. She winced, placing a protective hand over her swollen belly as the baby within responded with a forceful kick. 5 months pregnant and traveling across the frontier to meet a husband she'd never seen, desperation had driven her to extremes she'd never imagined. April 1877. Arizona Territory. The journey had been brutal. 3 weeks of lurching coaches, dusty trails, and nights spent in way station rooms that smelled of tobacco and unwashed bodies. But Katherine had endured it all with quiet determination, clutching the letters from Albert Prescott like talismans. His eloquent promises of a comfortable home, respectable position as town banker, and willingness to raise another man's child had been her salvation when Philadelphia had become a prison of whispers and condemnation. "Old Tucson coming up, madam," the driver called down. "Be there in 20 minutes or so." Katherine straightened her travel-worn dress and attempted to smooth her auburn hair beneath her bonnet. The desert landscape rolling past the window was unlike anything she'd ever known, vast expanses of sand and rock, punctuated by towering saguaro cacti standing like sentinels beneath the merciless sun. So different from the crowded streets and brick buildings of Philadelphia, where she'd grown up the sheltered daughter of a moderately successful merchant, until the promises. Until the scandal that followed when he disappeared after learning of her condition, leaving her to face ruin alone. The stagecoach rolled to a stop in front of a dusty building with Old Tucson Station painted in fading letters across its wooden facade. Katherine gathered her reticule and the small carpet bag containing her few remaining possessions. The driver helped her down, his weathered face showing a flicker of concern as he steadied her. "You be careful now, madam," he said gruffly. "Arizona ain't like back east." Katherine nodded her thanks, scanning the small gathering of people near the station. Albert had promised to meet her, a tall man with spectacles and a neat mustache, according to his description. But as the crowd thinned, no such figure appeared. "Miss Reed." She turned to find a tall man approaching, but any resemblance to Albert Prescott's description ended there. This man wore no spectacles, no banker's suit. Instead, he was dressed in worn denim trousers, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up revealing sun-bronzed forearms, and a dust-covered Stetson. His face was tanned and weathered, with lines etched around piercing blue eyes that studied her with evident surprise, lingering momentarily on her pregnant form. "Yes, I'm Katherine Reed," she replied, straightening her spine despite her exhaustion. "I'm here to meet Mr. Albert Prescott." The stranger removed his hat, revealing thick light brown hair. His expression shifted to something unreadable as he ran a hand through his hair. "Madam, I'm afraid there's been a complication. My name's Lucas Yates. I work Albert Prescott's ranch outside town." Katherine's heart sank. "Is Mr. Prescott delayed? I received his letter confirming today's arrival date." Lucas Yates shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Reed, I'm afraid Mr. Prescott passed away 3 weeks ago. Typhoid fever took him fast." The world seemed to tilt beneath Katherine's feet. The baby kicked again, a sharp reminder of her precarious situation. No husband, no security, no future. "I see," she managed, her voice surprisingly steady despite the panic rising within her. "And no one thought to inform me before I traveled all this way." "A letter was sent, but it must have missed you." Lucas replaced his hat, his discomfort evident. "Mr. Prescott asked me to look after his affairs if anything happened to him. He spoke highly of you in his final days." Katherine fought to maintain her composure as curious onlookers began to stare. I appreciate you coming to tell me in person, Mr. Yates. Could you direct me to a respectable boarding house? I'll need to consider my options." Lucas's gaze swept over her again, lingering on her belly. "Madam, there's more to it. Mr. Prescott left instructions. He wanted me to make sure you were provided for if he wasn't here to meet you. I don't understand. He left his property to me, the ranch, the cattle, but he made me promise to honor his commitment to you." Lucas looked deeply uncomfortable now. "He asked that I offer you a place to stay until you decide what you want to do next. The ranch house has plenty of room." Katherine stared at him, speechless. Stay at her ranch with this stranger, a cowboy who'd inherited her intended husband's property. "That's very kind, Mr. Yates, but highly improper. I couldn't possibly. Mrs. Thornton, the preacher's wife, stays out at the ranch 3 days a week to help with housekeeping," Lucas interrupted. "She'd be there as chaperone, and the alternative is the Dusty Rose Hotel, which isn't exactly." He trailed off, glancing toward a garish building down the street where painted women lounged on the balcony. Before Katherine could respond, a wave of dizziness swept over her. The long journey, the shock, the heat, it was all too much. She swayed on her feet. Lucas moved with surprising speed, his strong hands catching her elbows to steady her. "Miss Reed, are you all right?" "Just tired," she murmured, "and somewhat overwhelmed." Lucas's expression softened. "Look, I know this isn't what you planned. It's not what Albert planned either. But he was a good man, and he wanted to make sure you were looked after. At least come out to the ranch for a few days, get your bearings. Then if you want to head back east or somewhere else, I'll help you arrange it." Katherine looked around at the dusty frontier town with its rough-hewn buildings and rougher-looking inhabitants. The few women visible were either obviously respectable wives hurrying about their errands, or equally obviously not respectable at all. She had barely enough money for a week at any hotel, even if a decent one existed. "Very well, Mr. Yates. I accept your offer of temporary accommodation, but I want to be clear this is merely an arrangement of convenience until I determine my next course of action." Lucas nodded, relief evident in his expression. "Of course, madam. My wagon's just over there. Do you have any more luggage coming?" "No," Katherine said quietly. "Just this." She gestured to her small carpet bag, the meager remnant of her former life. Something flickered in Lucas's eyes, perhaps pity, though he quickly concealed it. "Then let's get you out to the ranch. You look like you could use some rest and a decent meal." The wagon ride to the ranch was mercifully shorter than Katherine had feared, about 5 miles outside town. They traveled mostly in silence, Katherine too exhausted and overwhelmed to maintain conversation, and Lucas apparently not a man of many words. Occasionally, he would point out landmarks or offer brief comments about the land they passed. "That's Sentinel Peak over there," he said at one point. "Apache used to use it as a lookout. Territory's mostly peaceful now, though there's still trouble sometimes." Katherine merely nodded, focusing on enduring the jolting ride without further distressing her already upset stomach. When they finally turned onto a long dirt drive leading to a sprawling ranch house, she nearly sighed with relief. The house was larger than she'd expected, a substantial 2-story structure built of sturdy timber with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings dotted the property, and in the distance, she could see cattle grazing on the sparse desert grass. "This is the Diamond P Ranch," Lucas explained as he helped her down from the wagon. "Albert built it up from nearly nothing over 15 years. About 800 head of cattle now, and some of the best grazing land in the territory." A woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair pulled into a severe bun and a thin, weathered face that broke into a welcoming smile. "You must be Miss Reed," she said, hurrying forward. I'm Martha Thornton. My husband's the preacher in town. Lucas told us about your situation. You poor dear, traveling all this way only to find such sad news." Katherine found herself warming to the older woman's genuine kindness. "Thank you for your welcome, Mrs. Thornton. I appreciate your presence here." "Got the blue bedroom ready for you," Martha continued, taking Katherine's carpetbag. "It's the nicest one with a view of the mountains. Come along now, you look dead on your feet. Lucas, bring up some hot water for a bath." Before Katherine could protest, Martha was guiding her into the house and up a staircase to a surprisingly comfortable bedroom furnished with solid, if plain, furniture. A large window indeed looked out toward distant mountains, their peaks tinged purple in the late afternoon light. "Now you rest," Martha insisted. "I'll bring up some tea and biscuits. Dinner won't be for a couple hours yet." Left alone, Katherine sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back to fall. Everything she'd planned, everything she'd hoped for gone in an instant. And now she was here, pregnant and alone in a strange territory with only the charity of a cowboy and a preacher's wife to rely on. The baby kicked again, a forceful reminder of her responsibility. She placed both hands on her belly. "We'll be all right," she whispered. "Somehow, we'll find our way through this." After a bath that washed away the dust of travel but not her anxiety, Katherine changed into one of her two remaining dresses, a simple navy cotton that strained slightly across her growing midsection. She pinned her hair up neatly and ventured downstairs, following the smell of cooking food. The kitchen was large and surprisingly well appointed. Martha bustled around a large cast-iron stove while Lucas sat at a wooden table, going through what appeared to be ledgers. He stood when Katherine entered. "Miss Reed, feeling better after some rest?" "Yes, thank you," she replied, though in truth she felt only marginally less exhausted. "Sit down, dear," Martha urged, placing a cup of coffee before her. "Dinner's almost ready." "Just a simple stew tonight, but tomorrow I'll make something special." "This is more than adequate, Mrs. Thornton. I don't wish to be any trouble." Lucas closed the ledger. "No trouble. The ranch has plenty." He hesitated, then added, "Albert was looking forward to your arrival. He had plans to expand the house, build a proper study. He thought you might enjoy having a library." Katherine felt a fresh pang of grief for the man she'd never met, who'd offered her salvation when she'd needed it most. He seemed very thoughtful in his letters. "He was a good man," Lucas agreed. "Started as a banker in Tucson but always wanted land. Built this place from scratch. I came to work for him 6 years ago. He taught me everything about ranching." "And left you everything," Katherine couldn't help noting, immediately regretting her tone. Lucas met her eyes directly. "Yes, madam, he did. But I worked this land alongside him for 6 years. There's not an acre I haven't ridden, not a cow I haven't branded, and I intend to honor his wishes regarding you." Martha intervened, setting bowls of steaming stew before them. "Let's not talk business at dinner. Miss Reed needs to regain her strength after that terrible journey." The stew was surprisingly delicious tender beef with vegetables, and a rich broth that Katherine found herself devouring hungrily. She hadn't realized how famished she was after days of stagecoach food. Conversation remained polite but subdued throughout the meal. Martha carried most of it, telling Katherine about Old Tucson, the church where her husband preached, and the small but growing community. "We even have a proper school now," Martha said proudly. "Miss Wilson came from Boston last year, teaches about 20 children." Lucas remained mostly quiet, answering when spoken to but otherwise focused on his meal. Katherine found herself studying him surreptitiously. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30 or so. There was an intensity about him, a contained energy that manifested in the way he moved, efficient and purposeful. His hands were those of a working man, strong and calloused, yet he handled his utensils with unexpected grace. After dinner, Lucas excused himself to check on a new calf, leaving Katherine alone with Martha. "He's a good man," Martha said as they washed dishes together. "Works harder than any 3 men. Albert thought of him like a son." "I'm sure he's very capable," Katherine replied neutrally. Martha gave her a shrewd look. "I know this isn't what you expected, dear, but God sometimes has different plans than we do." Katherine's hands stilled in the dishwater. "With all due respect, Mrs. Thornton, I've had quite enough of God's plans lately. I came here to marry a banker and provide a secure future for my child. Instead, I find myself completely dependent on the charity of a stranger." Martha's expression softened. "I understand, but perhaps you should give yourself time before deciding what to do next. The territory can be harsh, but it's also a place where people can start over, leave the past behind." "My past is coming with me," Katherine said, placing a hand on her belly. "In about 4 months. All the more reason to consider your options carefully." Martha dried her hands. "I'll be here Tuesday through Thursday each week. The rest of the time, Lucas has hands who work the ranch but don't come to the house. You'll have privacy." Katherine nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion again. "Thank you for your kindness, Mrs. Thornton. I think I should retire now." "Of course. Sleep as long as you need tomorrow." In her room, Katherine unpacked her few belongings, carefully placing Albert Prescott's letters on the bedside table. She read through the last one again, his neat handwriting describing the house and his plans for their life together. He'd seemed like a decent man, willing to give her child his name and a secure future. She'd never expected love that luxury had been sacrificed when she'd given her heart and virtue to David, only to be abandoned when consequences arrived. She moved to the window, gazing out at the vast Arizona night. Stars blazed in a profusion she'd never seen in Philadelphia, casting enough light that she could make out the silhouette of a man walking from the barn to a small cabin some distance from the main house. Lucas Yates. The cowboy who now controlled her fate. Katherine turned away from the window. She would rest, recover from her journey, and then make plans. Perhaps there were opportunities in Tucson, or she could continue to California. Anywhere that would allow her to support herself and her child with dignity. For now, though, she had shelter. And for tonight, that would have to be enough. Morning came with brilliant sunlight streaming through curtains she'd forgotten to close. Katherine woke disoriented, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar room until memory rushed back. She dressed quickly, embarrassed to have slept so late the clock on the bedside table showed nearly 9 o'clock. Downstairs, she found Martha kneading bread dough at the kitchen table. "Good morning, dear. Coffee's hot on the stove and there's eggs keeping warm in the oven." "Thank you, but you needn't go to such trouble," Katherine said, pouring herself coffee. "Nonsense. Growing a baby requires proper nourishment." Martha shaped the dough into loaves. "Lucas rode out at dawn to check the north pasture. He said to tell you to make yourself at home." Katherine ate the simple but delicious breakfast, then insisted on helping Martha with household chores. The work kept her mind occupied, preventing her from dwelling on her uncertain future. By mid-afternoon, however, restlessness drove her outside. The April day was warm but not unbearable, with a dry breeze that carried the scent of dust and sage. Katherine walked slowly around the property, taking in the main house, barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings that comprised the ranch headquarters. She had just started back toward the house when the sound of hoofbeats made her turn. Lucas was returning, riding a tall chestnut horse with easy confidence. He spotted her and changed direction, bringing the horse to a stop a few feet away. "Miss Reed," he greeted, removing his hat. "Hope you slept well." "Yes, thank you." She shielded her eyes from the sun to look up at him. "You have a beautiful property." Albert chose well. The water rights alone make it valuable. Lucas dismounted in a smooth motion. "Would you like to see more of it? I could hitch up the buggy later, show you the rest of the ranch." The offer surprised her. "I wouldn't want to take you from your work. Part of my work is knowing what's happening on every acre." He patted the horse's neck. "Besides, you should know what Albert was building here." Katherine hesitated, then nodded. "I would appreciate that, thank you. I'll come back for you in an hour or so, after I tend to a few things." True to his word, Lucas returned with a well-maintained buggy pulled by a matched pair of bays. He helped Katherine up to the seat, his hand strong and steady at her elbow, then climbed up beside her. The buggy was more comfortable than the wagon had been, with springs that absorbed most of the jolting from the rough terrain. Lucas kept the horses at an easy pace as they traveled across the ranch property. Diamond P runs from that ridge to the west all the way to Beaver Creek to the east, he explained, pointing out boundaries. About 4,000 acres, though only parts have good grazing. Albert was smart about water-dug wells and built catchments to get through the dry seasons. Katherine listened as he explained the operation of the ranch, pointing out features of the land and describing how the cattle business worked. Despite herself, she found his knowledge impressive and his quiet passion for the land oddly compelling. "How did you come to work for Mr. Prescott?" she asked, as they paused atop a small rise that offered a panoramic view of the property. Lucas was silent for a moment, his eyes on the distant horizon. "Was a cavalry scout for a while after the war. When I mustered out, drifted around taking whatever work I could find. Ended up in Old Tucson in '71. Albert caught me teaching some card sharp a lesson about cheating. Offered me a job instead of letting the sheriff lock me up. That was fortunate." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Changed my life. I'd never had much use for putting down roots before, but this land." He gestured toward the vista before them. "It gets in your blood." Katherine studied his profile, seeing for the first time a depth to the cowboy that she hadn't expected. "You clearly care about the ranch." "I do. And I respected Albert. That's why I intend to honor his wishes regarding you, Miss Reed." She stiffened slightly. "As I said, I'll only be imposing on your hospitality temporarily." Lucas turned to face her directly. "It's not imposition, and you should know that Albert left provisions for you in his will, a sum of money and certain considerations. We should discuss it when you're ready." Katherine's eyes widened in surprise. "He made provisions for me, but we never met." Albert was thorough in his planning, and he took his commitments seriously. They were silent for a moment, the implications hanging between them. "It's getting late," Lucas finally said, flicking the reins to turn the buggy around. "Martha will have dinner waiting." As they headed back toward the ranch house, Katherine found herself wrestling with conflicting emotions. Relief that she might have some financial security after all. Guilt that she would benefit from the death of a man she'd never known. And confusion about the cowboy beside her, who seemed far more complex than she'd initially judged him to be. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Katherine helped Martha with household tasks in the mornings, rested in the afternoons as the baby seemed particularly active then, and often found herself sitting on the porch in the evenings, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in spectacular colors. Lucas was often gone during the day, working with his ranch hands or riding the property. But he would return for dinner, cleaned up and in fresh clothes, maintaining a polite distance while showing her small kindnesses, bringing her a book he thought she might enjoy, having one of the hands fetch mail when he went to town, ensuring there was always fresh lemonade available as she'd mentioned a craving for it. On Thursday afternoon, Martha prepared to return to town for the weekend. "You'll be fine," she assured Katherine. "Lucas is a gentleman, despite appearances, and I've made enough food to last until I return on Tuesday." Katherine had grown fond of the older woman and found herself genuinely sorry to see her leave. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Thornton." "Martha, please. And you're welcome, dear. I've enjoyed the company. It gets lonely for a woman out here sometimes." After Martha's departure, Katherine felt suddenly awkward in the big house. Lucas was still out working, and the silence pressed in around her. She decided to explore the house more thoroughly, having been hesitant to do so with Martha present. The study was a handsome room with bookshelves, a solid desk, and leather chairs. Katherine ran her fingers along the spines of the books, a surprisingly eclectic collection ranging from practical manuals on cattle, breeding to poetry and novels. A small framed photograph on the desk caught her attention. It showed a younger Lucas standing beside a distinguished-looking older man she assumed was Albert Prescott. They were both smiling, Lucas's expression more open than she'd seen it. "That was taken 2 years ago when we won a prize bull at the territorial fair." Katherine startled at Lucas's voice behind her. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be snooping." "It's all right. You should know about the man you were going to marry." Lucas moved into the room, picking up the photograph. Albert was proud that day, said it proved Diamond P could compete with any ranch in the territory. "He looks kind," Katherine observed, studying the older man's face. "He was fairest man I ever knew." Lucas replaced the photograph carefully, said he wanted a wife to share his success with. Someone to build a legacy for. Katherine felt a pang of regret. "I was grateful for his offer. Not many men would consider taking on a woman in my situation." Lucas's eyes met hers. "He admired your honesty. Said most women would have tried to hide their condition or made up a story about being widowed." "I couldn't begin a marriage with a lie," she said simply. Something in Lucas's expression shifted. "No, I don't imagine you could." He cleared his throat. "I've got the will in the safe. If you'd like to discuss it after dinner, you should know what provisions he made for you." Katherine nodded. "Yes, I think that would be wise." Dinner that evening was a quiet affair. Lucas had cleaned up, his hair still damp from washing, dressed in clean clothes that, while still casual, showed respect for the occasion. Katherine found herself noticing the breadth of his shoulders, the way his forearms looked powerful yet somehow graceful as he served himself food. Afterward, they moved to the study where Lucas opened a small safe concealed behind a painting. He removed several documents and spread them on the desk. Albert was methodical about his affairs, Lucas explained, sorting through the papers. Updated his will regularly. "This was executed 6 weeks ago after he received your acceptance of his proposal." He handed her a document. Katherine read it carefully, her surprise growing with each paragraph. "He left me a quarter interest in the ranch," she finally said, looking up at Lucas in disbelief. Lucas nodded. "And a cash bequest of $5,000. He wanted to ensure you and your child would be provided for, regardless of whether you stayed in Arizona territory." Katherine's mind reeled at the generosity of a man she'd never met. $5,000 was a fortune enough to establish herself comfortably almost anywhere, and a quarter interest in a successful ranch represented long-term security she'd never dared hope for. I don't know what to say. It's extraordinarily generous." Albert believed in doing what was right. Lucas's expression remained neutral. "The will stipulates that if you choose not to remain here, you can sell your interest in the ranch. I'd be obligated to purchase it at fair market value." Katherine studied him. "And if I chose to stay?" Something flickered in his eyes. Then you'd be a part owner of Diamond P, entitled to a quarter of the profits and with a say in its operation. That seems a complicated arrangement. Ranching is complicated. Lucas leaned back in his chair. But Albert was of the opinion that a wife contributes to a ranch's success as much as a husband, just in different ways. He thought you deserved recognition for that. Katherine felt tears threatening and blinked them back. He was an unusual man. Yes, madam, he was. Lucas gathered the papers carefully. You don't need to decide anything right away. Take your time, think about what you want. Thank you. Katherine rose, suddenly needing to be alone with her thoughts. I think I'll retire now. Good night, Mr. Yates. Lucas, he said quietly. If we're going to be neighbors or business partners, you might as well use my given name. She paused at the doorway. Good night, Lucas. Good night, Katherine. It was the first time he'd used her first name. She found she didn't mind. In her room, Katherine sat by the window for a long time, staring at the star-filled sky while considering her options. The bequest changed everything. She had choices now, real choices. She could return east with enough money to establish herself modestly. She could go to San Francisco or another western city and start fresh. Or she could stay here, in this strange, beautiful land that was beginning to work its way under her skin. Stay and do what? Exactly. Be a silent partner in a ranch run by a man she barely knew. The practical challenges seemed insurmountable, and yet, Katherine placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby shift beneath her palm. What should we do, little one? She whispered. Where do we belong? The baby kicked in response, offering no answers. The weekend passed quietly. Lucas respected Katherine's space, working during the days and joining her for meals, but otherwise giving her time to think. On Sunday, he offered to drive her to church in town if she wished to attend, but Katherine declined, preferring to avoid the inevitable curious stares of the townspeople. Instead, she explored the ranch house more thoroughly, finding herself drawn to the small library off the main sitting room. The collection revealed Albert Prescott to have been a man of varied interests and thoughtful mind. She selected a volume of Tennyson's poetry and settled on the porch with it, finding the familiar verses comforting. She was still there when Lucas returned from his day's work, reading as the afternoon light began to fade. Good book? He asked, removing his hat as he stepped onto the porch. Katherine looked up. Tennyson. In memoriam, rather fitting, I suppose. Lucas nodded. Albert was fond of poetry, used to read aloud sometimes in the evenings. You don't strike me as a man with much patience for poetry, Lucas. A smile touched his lips, transforming his face. Don't let the hat and boots fool you, Katherine. I've been known to appreciate a well-turned phrase now and then. She found herself smiling back. I stand corrected. I'm heading to town tomorrow, he said, changing the subject. Need to discuss some business with the cattle broker. Is there anything you need? Katherine considered. Perhaps some fabric if there's a dry goods store. I'll need to alter my dresses soon. She gestured to her expanding waistline. Wilson's Mercantile should have what you need. I'll bring back a selection. That's very kind, but unnecessary. If you could just advance a small amount against my inheritance, I can go myself another time. Lucas frowned. No need for that. Write down what you want and I'll handle it. Something in his tone prevented further argument. Katherine nodded. Thank you, I'll make a list. The next day, with Lucas gone to town, Katherine found herself restless. The baby was particularly active, and sitting still proved impossible. She decided to walk around the property, staying within sight of the house as Lucas had advised. The Arizona spring was pleasant, with wildflowers blooming improbably among the cacti and scrub. Katherine found herself drawn to a small rise about a quarter mile from the house, which offered a view across the ranch property. She settled on a flat rock, catching her breath after the mild exertion of the walk. The vastness of the landscape still awed her. In Philadelphia, buildings had hemmed her in on all sides, the horizon always blocked by some structure. Here, the land stretched away seemingly forever, meeting the sky in a distant, hazy line. There was something both terrifying and exhilarating about such openness. A movement caught her eye, a rider approaching from the direction of town, still some distance away but moving at a steady pace. Too early to be Lucas returning, she thought. Perhaps one of the hands. Katherine watched as the rider drew closer, eventually recognizing the slight figure of a woman on horseback. Curious, she remained where she was, waiting as the horse and rider approached the rise. "Hello there," the woman called, waving as she spotted Katherine. She urged her horse up the gentle slope, revealing herself to be a pretty blonde woman perhaps a few years younger than Katherine, dressed in a practical riding habit. "Hope I'm not intruding," the woman said as she reined her horse to a stop. "I'm Rebecca Wilson. My father owns the mercantile in town." "Katherine Reed," Katherine replied, slightly uncomfortable at being caught alone. "Pleased to meet you." "Oh," recognition dawned on Rebecca's face. "You're Albert Prescott's mail-order bride. Father mentioned you'd arrived." "I'm so sorry about Albert. He was a fine man." Katherine managed a polite smile. "Thank you, though we never actually met." Rebecca dismounted with easy grace. "Mind if I join you? I've been riding since dawn delivering supplies to the Harper place, and these rocks look mighty inviting." "Of course." Katherine moved slightly to make room on the large flat rock. Rebecca settled beside her with a sigh of relief. "So you're staying out at Diamond P with Lucas Yates?" "Temporarily," Katherine said, hearing the defensive note in her own voice. "Mrs. Thornton stays at the ranch as chaperone." "Martha's a dear," Rebecca agreed. "Though she's in town now, I saw her this morning at the store." Her tone was casual, but her eyes held undisguised curiosity. "It's caused quite a stir in Old Tucson, you know." A mail-order bride arriving to find her intended deceased and staying on with the ranch foreman instead. Katherine stiffened. "It's not like that at all. Mr. Yates is merely honoring Mr. Prescott's wishes until I decide my future plans." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "No need to bristle. I'm not judging, quite the opposite. Lucas Yates is considered quite a catch in these parts. Half the unmarried women in the county have set their caps for him since he inherited Diamond P. "I have no interest in Mr. Yates's romantic prospects," Katherine said firmly. "I'm merely a temporary guest." Rebecca studied her for a moment, then glanced meaningfully at Katherine's pregnant state. "Of course. Well, if you need anything while you're here, please call on me. Town can be unwelcoming to newcomers, especially women in unconventional situations." "I'd be happy to offer friendship." The genuine kindness in her voice softened Katherine's defensiveness. "That's very kind, Miss Wilson. Rebecca, please, and I mean it." She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "I should continue home. Father will worry if I'm late." "But I ride this way often. Perhaps I'll see you again." "I'd like that," Katherine surprised herself by saying. Rebecca mounted her horse with practiced ease. "Lucas is a good man, you know, quiet and not one for town socials or small talk, but honorable to his core." She gathered her reins. "Just thought you should know, since you're staying under his roof." Before Katherine could respond, Rebecca had turned her horse and was riding toward town, leaving Katherine to ponder this unexpected encounter and the information it had provided. When Lucas returned late that afternoon, Katherine was in the kitchen attempting to prepare dinner, a task at which she had limited experience, having grown up in a household with servants. The results were less than impressive. Lucas paused in the doorway, Taking in the scene, Katherine flushed and frustrated, surrounded by evidence of culinary mishaps. To his credit, he didn't laugh. "I brought supplies," he said, setting several packages on the table. "And there's a cold supper from the hotel restaurant in town." Catherine's relief must have been evident because the corner of his mouth twitched. "I'm afraid cooking wasn't part of my education," she admitted. "Another reason I'm ill-suited to ranch life." "Skills can be learned," Lucas replied simply. He unwrapped packages containing bread, cold chicken, pickles, and apple pie. "Martha offered to teach you if you're interested." Katherine busied herself finding plates and utensils. "I met Rebecca Wilson today. She was riding past the ranch." If Lucas was surprised by the change of subject, he didn't show it. "Rebecca's a good sort. Helps her father run the store since her mother passed. She mentioned that you're considered quite eligible now that you own Diamond P." Katherine immediately regretted the comment, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. Lucas looked up, his expression unreadable. "People talk. Doesn't mean much." They ate in slightly awkward silence for a few minutes before Lucas spoke again. "Got your fabric," he said, gesturing to a parcel on the side table. "Mrs. Chen at the dress shop helped select it, said it would be suitable for your condition." "Thank you." Katherine was touched by his thoughtfulness. "I'll reimburse you, of course." "No need." Lucas seemed uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Also brought mail. There's a letter for you." Katherine looked up in surprise. She'd written to her cousin in Philadelphia shortly after arriving but hadn't expected a reply so soon. Lucas retrieved an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. The handwriting wasn't her cousin's. With a sense of foreboding, Katherine opened the letter. As she read, her hands began to tremble. "Bad news?" Lucas asked quietly. "It's from David." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "The father of my child. Somehow he discovered where I'd gone. He says he's coming to Arizona to make things right." Lucas's expression darkened. "The man who abandoned you when you told him about the baby." "Yes." Katherine set the letter down, her appetite gone. "He claims he's had a change of heart, that he wants to marry me after all." "Do you want that?" The directness of the question startled her. "Want what?" "To marry him, the father of your child." Katherine stared at the letter, emotions warring within her. "Once I wanted nothing more. I loved him, or thought I did." She shook her head. "But now, after he left me to face scandal and ruin alone, I don't know." Lucas was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, controlled. "You have options now. Prescott's bequest means you're not dependent on anyone's charity, including mine, or his." He nodded toward the letter. "Yes," Katherine agreed, still trying to process this unexpected development. "Though apparently David doesn't know about my inheritance. He writes that he's prepared to support me properly now." "Convenient timing," Lucas observed dryly. Katherine looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Lucas met her gaze directly. "Just seems interesting that he had this change of heart after you'd already traveled 2,000 miles to marry another man." The implication hung in the air between them. Katherine had been so shocked by David's letter that she hadn't questioned his motives. But Lucas was right, the timing was suspicious. "You think he's after money?" The idea stung, but she couldn't dismiss it. Lucas shrugged. "Don't know the man, but in my experience, people who abandon their responsibilities once tend to do it again when things get difficult." Katherine couldn't argue with that logic. "He says he'll arrive in Old Tucson next month. That gives me time to consider what I want to do." "Yes, madam, it does." Lucas stood, gathering their plates. "And whatever you decide, you have a place here for as long as you need it." His quiet support touched something deep inside her. "Thank you, Lucas. You've been kinder than I had any right to expect." He looked momentarily uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Just doing what Albert would have wanted. but Katherine wasn't entirely sure that was the whole truth anymore. The following weeks brought a gradual shift in Katherine's relationship with Lucas. While still maintaining proper boundaries, they began to spend more time in each other's company. Lucas showed her more of the ranch operations, explaining the business side of cattle ranching. Katherine, in turn, applied her education to helping organize the ranch's accounts, discovering a talent for the work that surprised them both. Martha continued her Tuesday to Thursday presence at the ranch, providing both practical help and respectable chaperoning. She also began teaching Katherine basic cooking skills, starting with simple dishes that even a novice could manage. "You're a quick study," Martha observed one afternoon as they prepared biscuits together. "Most city ladies take much longer to adapt." "Necessity is a powerful motivator," Katherine replied, carefully cutting the dough. "I need to learn to be self-sufficient, whatever my future holds." Martha cast her a shrewd glance. "And have you decided what that future might be? Lucas mentioned you received a letter from the baby's father." Katherine sighed. "Yes, David claims he wants to marry me now. He should arrive in about 2 weeks. And do you want to marry him? I don't know." Katherine placed the biscuits on a baking sheet. "Once I thought I loved him. He was charming, educated, from a good Philadelphia family. My parents approved of the match before." She gestured to her now very prominent belly. "Before this complicated matters." Martha nodded sympathetically. "And now I wonder if I ever really knew him at all. A man who truly loved me wouldn't have abandoned me when I needed him most." "That's wisdom speaking," Martha said approvingly. "What about Lucas?" Katherine nearly dropped the baking sheet. "What about him?" Martha's expression was knowing. "I've seen how you look at each other when you think no one's watching. That's not." Katherine flustered, then sighed. "It's complicated, Martha. Life generally is, dear, especially matters of the heart." Katherine slid the biscuits into the oven, using the moment to compose herself. "Even if there were feelings, Lucas has made it clear he's only fulfilling Albert's wishes by helping me. And I'm in no position to consider romance with anyone. I have a child to think about." "Children need fathers," Martha said gently. "Good, reliable ones, not men who run at the first sign of difficulty." Before Katherine could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Lucas wasn't due back from the north pasture for hours yet. Martha moved to the window. "It's Rebecca Wilson with a man I don't recognize." Katherine felt a sudden chill. "What does he look like?" "Tall, well-dressed. City clothes, not Western. Handsome in a polished sort of way." Katherine's heart began to race. "It's David. He's early." Martha turned to her with concern. "Are you ready to see him?" "No," Katherine admitted, "but I don't see that I have much choice." Squaring her shoulders, she moved to the front door, stepping onto the porch as Rebecca, and the man dismounted. David Hartford looked much as she remembered, tall and handsome in an aristocratic way, with carefully styled dark hair and the confident bearing of a man accustomed to privilege. Seeing him again after all these months caused a confused tumult of emotions: anger, hurt, and the ghostly remnants of her former affection. "Katherine," he called, hurrying forward with arms outstretched as if to embrace her. She took a step back. "David, you're earlier than your letter indicated." He stopped, taking in her reserve and her obviously pregnant state. Something flickered in his eyes before his charming smile reasserted itself. "I couldn't wait to see you once I knew where you were." He gestured to Rebecca. "Miss Wilson was kind enough to show me the way when I arrived in town asking after you." Rebecca looked slightly uncomfortable. "I hope that was all right, Katherine. Mr. Hartford was quite persuasive about his urgency to see you." "It's fine," Katherine assured her, though it wasn't entirely true. "Thank you for guiding him." "I should get back to town," Rebecca said, clearly sensing the tension. Father needs help with inventory this afternoon." Once Rebecca had ridden away, Katherine turned back to David. "You should have waited in town. I would have come to see you when I was ready." David's smile faltered slightly. "After traveling all this way to find you, Katherine, I've come to make things right between us." Martha appeared beside Katherine. "Perhaps you'd like to come inside, Mr. Hartford." Katherine should sit down. In her condition, she shouldn't be standing in this heat. David looked startled by Martha's presence but quickly recovered. "Of course. Thank you, Mrs. Thornton. I help out at the ranch." Martha's tone was polite but cool. Inside, the awkwardness intensified as David took in the ranch house with barely concealed surprise. "This is where you've been living?" he asked, glancing around the comfortable but decidedly rustic surroundings. "Yes," Katherine replied, lowering herself carefully into a chair. "Since my arrival." David sat opposite her while Martha busied herself in the kitchen, remaining within earshot, a fact for which Katherine was grateful. "I've been frantic with worry since I returned to Philadelphia and found you gone," David began. "Your cousin finally told me you'd come west to marry." "After you abandoned me," Katherine reminded him, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "When I told you about the baby, you said, and I quote, 'That's unfortunate but certainly not my concern.'" David had the grace to look abashed. "I panicked, Katherine. The news was unexpected and I wasn't prepared for fatherhood, but I've had time to reflect on my responsibilities. 6 months of time," she noted dryly, "during which I faced social ruin alone. I know I hurt you terribly," he conceded. "But I'm here now to make it right, to marry you and give our child my name." Katherine studied the man she had once thought she loved. He was as handsome as ever, his manners impeccable, his words seemingly sincere. Yet something felt different, or perhaps it was she who had changed. "What about your family's objections? Your father made it quite clear I was no longer welcome in your social circle." David waved a dismissive hand. "Father will come around once we're married, and if not, I have prospects in Denver. We needn't return to Philadelphia." Katherine was saved from responding by the sound of horses outside. A moment later, the front door opened, and Lucas entered, stopping short at the sight of the visitor. His eyes went immediately to Katherine, a silent question in them. When she gave a small nod indicating she was all right, he turned his attention to David. "Lucas Yates," he said simply, crossing to stand near Katherine's chair. "I own this ranch." David rose, extending his hand. "David Hartford, I'm Katherine's fiancé." Lucas ignored the outstretched hand, his expression hardening. Funny, she never mentioned being engaged. An uncomfortable silence fell. Katherine cleared her throat. "David is the father of my child. He's come to discuss our situation." Understanding dawned in Lucas's eyes. "I see." His voice was carefully neutral, but Katherine could sense the tension in him. "Well, Mr. Hartford, you've had a long journey. Will you be staying in town?" David frowned at the implication. "I had hoped to stay here with Katherine." "That won't be possible," Lucas stated flatly. "This is a respectable household," David bristled. "I fail to see how my presence would compromise that, given that Katherine is carrying my child." "All the more reason to maintain proprieties," Lucas countered. "The old Tucson Hotel has clean rooms. You can visit during the day with Mrs. Thornton present." Katherine watched the exchange with a mixture of gratitude toward Lucas for his protection and concern about David's reaction. His expression had darkened, but years of social training prevented an outburst. "Very well," David said stiffly. "If those are the conditions for seeing Katherine, I'll abide by them. For now." The implied threat wasn't lost on Lucas, whose jaw tightened. "Miss Reed is under my protection while she's on Diamond P land. Remember that." Martha intervened smoothly. "Mr. Hartford, you must be tired from your journey. Why don't I fix you something to eat before you head back to town? The biscuits are just about ready." The tension in the room eased slightly as Martha's practical suggestion gave everyone a moment to compose themselves. David accepted the offer with strained politeness, and the awkward meal that followed was mercifully brief. When David finally prepared to leave, he asked for a moment alone with Katherine. Lucas clearly didn't like the idea but retreated to the porch after Katherine nodded her assent. "Katherine," David said once they were alone, taking her hands in his, "I know you have doubts, but I truly want to make things right. We can have a good life together, raise our child properly." He squeezed her fingers. "Just promise you'll consider my proposal." Katherine gently extracted her hands from his. "I need time, David. This is all very sudden." "Of course." He smiled confidently. "But don't take too long. I'm anxious to begin our future together." He glanced around the ranch house. Somewhere more civilized than this wilderness. After he departed, Katherine remained seated, trying to process the tumultuous emotions his unexpected arrival had stirred. Lucas returned, his expression carefully neutral. "You all right?" he asked simply. "I don't know," she admitted. "I never expected to see him again, let alone have him propose marriage." Lucas leaned against the doorframe, keeping a respectful distance. "What are you going to do?" "What would you do?" she countered, genuinely curious about his perspective. He considered the question seriously. "Can't say." "Never been in your position," he paused. "But I do know something about judging character. Men who run once tend to run again when things get hard." "That's what I keep thinking," Katherine confessed. "And yet, this is my child's father. Shouldn't I at least consider giving my baby a chance to have both parents?" Lucas was quiet for a long moment. A father who's there in body but not in spirit isn't much of a father at all. His voice held a note of personal knowledge that made Katherine wonder about his own upbringing. "You don't like him," she observed. A ghost of a smile touched Lucas's lips. "That obvious? You weren't exactly subtle." "No, madam, I wasn't." Lucas straightened. "But my feelings don't matter. It's your decision to make." As he turned to leave, Katherine called after him. "Lucas." He paused, looking back at her. "Thank you. For your protection and your honesty." He touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. "Always, Katherine." The word lingered in the air between them, carrying more weight than its simple meaning should allow. David's arrival complicated Katherine's already uncertain situation. True to his word, he took a room at the hotel in Old Tucson and began a determined courtship, visiting the ranch daily while Martha was present. He brought small gifts, spoke of their future together, and made an obvious effort to charm everyone around him, including Martha. Only Lucas remained immune to David's charisma, maintaining a cool politeness whenever the other man was present but otherwise avoiding him. Katherine noticed that Lucas began spending more time away from the house during David's visits, focusing on ranch work that kept him in the distant pastures. On the fourth day after David's arrival, Katherine found herself alone with Martha after David had returned to town. "He's very charming," Martha observed, her tone neutral. "Yes," Katherine agreed. "He always was." "But," Katherine sighed, "but I'm not the same woman who fell for that charm in Philadelphia. I trusted him once and he betrayed that trust in the worst possible way." "People can change," Martha said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced herself. "Can they? Or do they just become better at hiding their true nature?" Katherine rubbed her lower back, which had been aching all day. "And he keeps talking about leaving Arizona, moving to Denver or back east. As if it's assumed I'd want to go." Martha's eyebrows rose. "And you don't?" The question gave Katherine pause. A month ago, she would have said yes without hesitation. Now she found herself surprisingly reluctant to leave the territory she'd initially found so alien. "I don't know," she admitted. There's something about this place. The openness, the possibility. In Philadelphia, I was always Katherine Reed, daughter of Edward Reed, expected to behave in certain ways, move in certain circles. Here, I could be anyone, including part owner of a successful ranch, Martha pointed out. Have you told Mr. Hartford about your inheritance? No, Katherine admitted. I wanted to be sure of his motives first. Martha nodded approvingly. Wise, and Lucas, have you told him what you're considering? We haven't spoken much since David arrived. He's been distant men, Martha said with fond exasperation, so skilled at avoiding what troubles them. What do you mean? Martha gave her a knowing look. Lucas cares for you, Katherine, more than he's willing to admit even to himself. Seeing the father of your child return has been difficult for him. Katherine felt a flush rise in her cheeks. That's ridiculous. Lucas is merely fulfilling his promise to Albert. If you believe that, you're not as observant as I thought you were, Martha replied dryly. Before Katherine could respond, the sound of horses approaching drew their attention. It was too early for Lucas to return from the north pasture, and David had just left for town. Martha moved to the window. It's Lucas, riding hard, and he's not alone. Katherine joined her at the window, watching as Lucas galloped toward the house, another rider close behind him. As they drew nearer, she recognized Rebecca Wilson, her face streaked with tears. Lucas dismounted quickly, helping Rebecca down before hurrying up to the porch. The young woman was clearly distraught. What happened? Martha asked, ushering them inside. Indians hit the Miller place, Lucas explained grimly. Rebecca was there delivering supplies when they attacked. She managed to get away, ran into me on the trail. It was horrible, Rebecca sobbed. They killed Mr. Miller and took Mrs. Miller and the children, Katherine gasped. Are you sure they were taken? Not. Saw it happen, Rebecca confirmed, accepting the glass of water Martha offered. 3 warriors. They killed Robert when he tried to fight, then took Sarah and the little ones. Lucas's expression was grim. I need to gather the men. Most of our hands are out with the herd, but I can probably get 5 or 6 together quickly. You're going after them? Katherine asked, alarmed. Have to. Trail's fresh, and the army post is 2 days' ride. By then, it'll be too late. The implications hung heavy in the air. Everyone knew stories of settlers taken by hostile Indians. The outcomes were rarely good, especially for women and children. I'll go to town, alert the sheriff, Martha said decisively. He can gather more men to help. Lucas nodded. Good. Rebecca, you stay here with Katherine. I've sent one of the hands to patrol the property, but you should both stay inside, doors locked. Katherine suddenly realized the danger might extend beyond the Miller family. David's in town. Should he be warned? Sheriff will spread the word, Lucas assured her. Anyone in town will be safer than those out on isolated homesteads anyway. He moved to the gun cabinet in the corner of the room, removing rifles and ammunition. I'll leave you these just in case. Both of you know how to shoot, Rebecca nodded. Katherine hesitated, then shook her head. I've never fired a gun. Rebecca can show you the basics. Lucas checked a revolver before holstering it. I need to go. Should be back by morning one way or another. The casual reference to his potential death sent a chill through Katherine. Without thinking, she caught his arm as he turned to leave. Be careful, she said softly. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, and perhaps something more. Always am. Martha left with Lucas, headed for town, leaving Katherine and Rebecca alone in the suddenly quiet house. Rebecca's hands were still shaking, but she managed to help Katherine secure the doors and windows. This happens sometimes, Rebecca explained as they worked. Most of the Apache are peaceful now, living on the reservation, but renegade bands still raid occasionally. You're very brave, Katherine told her, genuinely impressed by the younger woman's composure after such an ordeal. Rebecca attempted a smile. Not brave, just practical. My father taught me that falling apart doesn't help in a crisis. As darkness fell, the two women maintained a nervous vigil in the ranch house. Rebecca, true to her word, gave Katherine a basic lesson in handling the rifle Lucas had left, how to load it, aim, and fire if necessary. The weight of the weapon felt alien in Katherine's hands, but she forced herself to pay attention. If danger came, she needed to be able to protect herself and her unborn child. "Lucas will find them," Rebecca said confidently as they sat together in the kitchen, unable to sleep despite their exhaustion. "He knows this territory better than anyone. Was a cavalry scout during the Apache conflicts." Katherine latched onto this information. "He mentioned that briefly, that he was in the cavalry after the war." Rebecca nodded. "He doesn't talk about it much, but everyone knows. He has a reputation among the Apache. They call him the Shadow because he could track them when no other white man could." This new knowledge added another dimension to the quiet, reserved rancher Katherine had come to know. "He's a complicated man." "The best ones usually are," Rebecca agreed with a sad smile. "I had quite a fondness for him myself once. Half the unmarried women in the territory did, but Lucas never showed interest in any of us. Until Albert died and left him the ranch," Katherine couldn't help observing. Rebecca's laugh held no bitterness. "Oh, that brought out the fortune hunters for sure, but Lucas sees through that kind of attention." She gave Katherine a meaningful look. "He respects authenticity, people who are exactly who they appear to be." Before Katherine could respond, a sound outside made them both freeze. Footsteps on the porch, followed by a knock at the door. Rebecca reached for the rifle, but Katherine placed a restraining hand on her arm. "Wait," she whispered. "Indians wouldn't knock." "Katherine." David's voice came through the door. "Are you there? It's David." Relief washed over her. "It's all right," she told Rebecca, moving to unlock the door. David stood on the porch, looking agitated. "Thank God you're safe," he exclaimed, pulling Katherine into an embrace that pressed uncomfortably against her belly. "The whole town's in an uproar. Indian attack at the Miller place." "We know," Katherine said, disentangling herself. "Rebecca was there. She escaped." David noticed Rebecca for the first time, taking in her disheveled appearance and the rifle she still held. "Miss Wilson, I'm glad you're unharmed." "The Millers weren't so fortunate," Rebecca replied grimly. David entered the house, closing the door firmly behind him. "The sheriff's gathering men to go after them, but it may be too late already." He turned to Katherine. "I came as soon as I heard. We need to leave immediately." "Leave?" Katherine echoed. "Leave where? Arizona Territory. It's too dangerous." David gripped her shoulders. "There's a stage leaving for Tucson tomorrow morning, and from there we can catch the train east. We'll be married in Denver." The abruptness of his plan left Katherine momentarily speechless. Rebecca had no such constraint. "You can't just run away," she said incredulously. "This is Katherine's home now." David spared her a dismissive glance. "This wilderness is no place for a woman in Katherine's condition, especially not with savages attacking innocent families." Katherine found her voice. "David, I'm not leaving. Lucas and the others have gone after the Millers. We need to be here when they return." "Lucas," David's expression darkened. "The ranch foreman, Katherine, what does it matter what he's doing? He works for you, not the other way around." "He owns this ranch," Katherine corrected. "I'm merely a partial owner, thanks to Albert Prescott's generosity." David stilled. "Partial owner? What are you talking about?" Katherine realized she'd revealed her inheritance without intending to. "Albert left me a quarter interest in Diamond P Ranch in his will, and a cash bequest." "How much?" The question came quickly, sharply. "That's hardly relevant right now," Katherine evaded, disliking the sudden calculation in his eyes. It's entirely relevant if we're to plan our future together. David's tone had changed, becoming more businesslike. How much, Catherine? $5,000, Rebecca supplied, her voice cool. Plus the ranch share, which is worth at least as much again, possibly more given the improvements Lucas has made. David absorbed this information, his expression shifting subtly. That changes things, does it? Catherine asked quietly. How exactly does it change things, David? He recovered quickly. It means we have more options, of course. We could start a new life anywhere we choose. We, Catherine echoed. Or you, 6 months ago, you wanted nothing to do with me or our child. Now that you know I have money, suddenly you're eager to marry me and start a new life together. David had the grace to look abashed. You misunderstand. I came here to make things right between us, regardless of your financial situation. Did you? Catherine studied the man she had once trusted implicitly. Then, why did you never once ask about our child? You've been here 4 days, David. You've talked about Denver, about Philadelphia, about your business prospects, but you haven't asked a single question about the baby. David seemed genuinely startled by the observation. That is, of course I care about the child. You don't even know if it's a boy or a girl, Catherine pressed. You haven't asked when I'm due, if I felt it move, what names I'm considering. Nothing. Rebecca moved quietly to the window, giving them as much privacy as the situation allowed while still keeping watch. David ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Catherine, be reasonable. I've been adjusting to the idea of fatherhood. It's a significant change in my plans. Your plans, Catherine repeated. That's what matters to you, isn't it? Your plans, your prospects, your comfort. She placed a protective hand over her belly. This child is not part of your plans. It never was. The only thing that changed is your discovery that I'm no longer destitute. That's unfair, David protested, but his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers. Is it? Then prove me wrong. Tell me you love me, David. Tell me you want this child, regardless of my financial circumstances. The silence that followed was answer enough. David shifted uncomfortably, his handsome face working through various expressions as he sought the right words. Catherine, we could have a good life together, he finally said. A comfortable, respectable life. Isn't that what you wanted when you agreed to marry a stranger sight unseen? The question struck uncomfortably close to the truth. When she'd agreed to marry Albert Prescott, she had indeed been seeking security and respectability above all else. Love had seemed a luxury she could no longer afford. But something had changed in the weeks since she'd arrived in Arizona territory. She had changed. What I wanted then, and what I want now are different things, she said slowly. I've learned that security isn't just about money or social position. It's about being with people you can trust, who stand by you no matter what. She thought of Lucas riding out to face danger to save the Miller family, of Martha's steady support, of Rebecca's courage. I've found that here, in this wilderness you're so eager to escape. David's expression hardened. You can't seriously be considering staying here, raising our child among cowboys and Indians. Better that than raising a child with a father who sees it as an inconvenience, Catherine replied quietly. I think you should go back to town, David. It's not safe for you to travel back in the dark. This discussion isn't over, David warned. You're upset and not thinking clearly. We'll talk again tomorrow when you've had time to consider your options rationally. My options are perfectly clear to me, Catherine said with newfound certainty. But you're right about one thing, it's dangerous out there tonight. You should stay until morning. Rebecca rejoined them. He can sleep in the bunkhouse, I'll show him the way. David looked as if he might protest, but something in Catherine's expression stopped him. Very well. Until tomorrow. After Rebecca had escorted David to the bunkhouse, Returning with assurances that he was settled for the night, the two women maintained their vigil in the main house. Sleep was impossible, their nerves too frayed by the day's events and the knowledge that Lucas and the others were out there somewhere in the darkness, tracking renegade Apaches. "You were magnificent," Rebecca said admiringly as they sat together in the kitchen. "The way you stood up to Mr. Hartford," Katherine smiled tiredly. "Not so magnificent, just finally clear about what I want and don't want." "And what do you want?" Katherine considered the question seriously. "Safety for my child, a place where we can belong, work that matters." She paused. "And people around me who are honest and true. People like Lucas," Rebecca suggested innocently. Katherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Lucas is complicated." "As we established earlier," Rebecca agreed with a smile, "but sometimes the most complicated people are the most worthwhile." Before Katherine could respond, the distant sound of horses approaching made them both tense. Rebecca moved to the window, peering out into the pre-dawn darkness. "It's Lucas," she reported with relief, "and others with him." They hurried to the door, watching as several riders approached the house. In the dim light, Katherine could make out Lucas in the lead, followed by 4 other men, and their 3 smaller figures on horseback, the Millers. Lucas dismounted stiffly, helping a woman and 2 children down from their horses. Even in the poor light, Katherine could see that they were disheveled and terrified but apparently unharmed. "Mrs. Miller, Emily, Joseph," Lucas said gently, "you're safe now. This is Diamond P Ranch." Martha, who had returned from town with the riders, took charge immediately. "Let's get you inside. Katherine, can you heat water for baths? Rebecca, find some clean clothes for Mrs. Miller and the children." As the others moved into the house, Lucas remained outside, speaking quietly with the other men. Katherine hesitated, torn between helping Martha with the Millers and checking on Lucas. Concern for him won out. She approached cautiously, not wanting to interrupt. Lucas looked exhausted, his face drawn with fatigue and smudged with dirt and what might have been blood. "You found them," she said simply when there was a pause in the conversation. Lucas turned, seeming to notice her for the first time. The other men discreetly moved away, leading their horses toward the barn. "Caught up to the raiding party just before midnight," Lucas confirmed. "They weren't expecting pursuit so soon. We managed to create a diversion and get the Millers away without a fight." "You're injured," Katherine observed, noticing how he favored his left arm, just a scratch. "One of them got off a shot as we were leaving." Katherine stepped closer, concern overriding propriety. "Let me see." Lucas started to protest but seemed too tired to argue. He allowed her to examine his arm, wincing slightly as she pushed up his sleeve to reveal a deep graze just below his shoulder. The wound had been hastily bandaged but was still seeping blood. "This needs proper cleaning and bandaging," she insisted. "Come inside. Need to see to the men first. Make sure the Miller children are all right. Martha and Rebecca are taking care of the Millers," Katherine assured him. "And your men are perfectly capable of tending to themselves and the horses. You're no use to anyone if that wound festers." Something that might have been amusement flickered in his tired eyes. "Yes, madam." In the kitchen, Katherine heated water and gathered clean cloths. Lucas sat at the table, looking ready to collapse from exhaustion but stubbornly remaining upright. "The Millers," he said as Katherine began cleaning his wound. "They'll need a place to stay until they can rebuild." "Of course they can stay here," Katherine agreed. The wound was ugly but not deep enough to require stitches, she was relieved to see. "There's plenty of room." Lucas watched her work, his expression unreadable in the lamplight. "You're good at this. Steady hands." "I volunteered at a hospital in Philadelphia sometimes," she explained, applying a salve Martha had shown her. Basic nursing skills were considered appropriate for young ladies of good family. Useful skills out here. Yes, I'm discovering that many things considered ornamental in Philadelphia society are actually practical in Arizona territory. Lucas winced slightly as she began bandaging his arm. Hartford's still here, in the bunkhouse, Katherine confirmed. He arrived last night concerned about the Indian attack. He wanted me to leave with him immediately, go east on the morning stage. Lucas's expression didn't change, but she felt him tense under her hands. "And will you?" Katherine secured the bandage before answering. "No." "I told him I'm staying." Now Lucas did look up, his tired eyes searching her face. "Because of the danger of traveling, because my place is here." She held his gaze steadily. "This is my home now, or it could be if I'm welcome to stay." "You own a quarter of the ranch," Lucas reminded her. "You're welcome by right." "That's not what I'm asking, and you know it." Katherine surprised herself with her boldness. "Am I welcome to stay, Lucas? Not because of Albert's will or obligation, but because you want me here." For a long moment, he simply looked at her, exhaustion and something else, something deeper in his eyes. "Yes," he finally said, his voice rough. "You're welcome here, Katherine. You and your child." The simple sincerity of his answer moved her more than any flowery declaration could have. "Good. Because I've discovered I rather like it here. The land, the people," she paused. "Some people in particular." Before Lucas could respond, Martha appeared in the doorway. "The Millers are settled in the guest rooms upstairs. They're exhausted but unharmed, thank God." She noticed the bandage on Lucas's arm. "You're injured." "It's taken care of," Lucas assured her. "Katherine has steady hands." Martha's knowing gaze moved between them. "I see. Well, you should get some rest, Lucas. It's nearly dawn already." "Soon," he promised. "Need to check on the men first." After Lucas left, Martha joined Katherine at the table. "The look on that man's face," she observed with a small smile. "I haven't seen Lucas Yates so transparent since I've known him." Katherine felt herself blushing. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Martha patted her hand. "And I approve. He's a good man, Katherine. The kind who stays when things get difficult." The stark contrast to David couldn't have been clearer. "I've made my decision, Martha. I'm staying at Diamond P. Whether or not anything develops between Lucas and me, this is where I want to raise my child." Martha smiled approvingly. "I think that's very wise. Now, what about Mr. Hartford? He's still here, presumably expecting a different answer in the morning." Katherine sighed. "I'll speak with him again, make it clear that my decision is final." She didn't have to wait long. As dawn broke fully over the ranch, David appeared at the main house, his city clothes looking decidedly out of place among the trail-worn men having coffee on the porch. "Katherine," he called, spotting her through the open door. "We need to talk." She stepped outside, closing the door behind her for privacy. "Yes, we do." David took in her disheveled appearance and resolute expression with evident concern. "You look exhausted. Has something happened?" "Lucas and his men rescued the Miller family during the night," she explained. "They're here now, recovering." "Then you understand why we need to leave," David pressed. "This territory is too dangerous. These attacks could happen again at any time." "They could," Katherine acknowledged. "But running away isn't the answer. The Millers will rebuild." "That's what people do here. They face challenges and overcome them together." David studied her face. "You've changed, Katherine." "Yes," she agreed simply. "I have." "You're really considering staying here, raising our child in this wilderness?" "I'm not considering it. I've decided." Katherine met his gaze steadily. "This is my home now, David. I own part of this ranch, and I intend to make a life here." "With the cowboy?" David asked sharply. "Don't think I haven't noticed the way he looks at you, the way you look at him." Katherine refused to be baited. "My relationship with Lucas isn't the issue here. The issue is that you and I have no future together. We never did, not really." David's handsome face hardened. "Because I made one mistake. Katherine, I came all this way to make things right." "You came all this way when you heard I'd traveled to Arizona to marry a wealthy rancher," she corrected gently. "And your interest increased notably when you learned about my inheritance. That's unfair. Is it? Then answer me honestly, David. If I told you right now that I'd give up my inheritance, every penny, and come with you with nothing but the clothes on my back and our unborn child, would you still want to marry me?" The silence that followed was answer enough. David's eyes slid away from hers, his jaw working as he searched for words. "I thought not," Katherine said softly. "You should return to Philadelphia, David, or Denver, wherever your prospects take you, but my place is here." His expression shifted from discomfort to anger. "You'd rather stay here with these frontier roughnecks than return to civilization with the father of your child?" "Yes," Katherine said simply, "because these roughnecks have shown me more honor, more kindness, and more genuine care in a few weeks than you showed in all our time together." She placed a protective hand over her belly. "My child deserves better than a father who sees them as an inconvenience to be overcome or a means to an inheritance." David's face flushed. "You'll regret this, Katherine. When that baby comes, and you're stuck in this God-forsaken territory with no one but cowboys and Indians for company, you'll wish you'd made a different choice." "Perhaps," Katherine allowed, "but I doubt it." David stared at her for a long moment as if expecting her to reconsider. When she remained steadfast, he finally nodded stiffly. "I'll be on the morning stage then. If you change your mind, you know where to find me. Denver, most likely." "Goodbye, David," Katherine said with genuine sadness for what might have been, had he been a different sort of man. "I wish you well." She watched as he walked away, heading toward the barn where his borrowed horse waited. There was a sense of finality in his departure, the closing of a chapter in her life that had brought both pain and, ultimately, the unexpected gift of a new beginning in this wild territory. The door opened behind her and Lucas stepped out onto the porch. He said nothing, simply standing beside her as they watched David ride away. "He's gone, then?" Lucas asked after the rider had disappeared from view. "Yes," Katherine confirmed. "Back to civilization, as he calls it." "And you're staying?" It wasn't quite a question. "I am." She turned to face him. "If that's still acceptable to you." Lucas's tired face softened. "More than acceptable." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the rising sun cast long shadows across the ranch yard. The events of the night, the danger, the rescue, the confrontation with David all seemed to have crystallized something between them, an understanding that went beyond words. "I should get some rest," Lucas finally said. "Been a long night." "Of course," Katherine smiled. "Thank you, Lucas, for everything you did last night. Those children might not be alive if not for you." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Did what anyone would do." "No," Katherine said firmly. "Not anyone. It takes a special kind of man to ride into danger for strangers." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, something new and fragile but undeniably real. "Get some rest, Lucas," she said softly. "We can talk more later." He nodded, touching the brim of his hat in that characteristic gesture before heading toward his cabin. Katherine watched him go, a sense of rightness settling over her despite her exhaustion. This was where she belonged, where her child belonged. The future stretched before her, uncertain but full of promise. The weeks that followed brought significant changes to Diamond P Ranch. The Millers stayed for a month while rebuilding their homestead, with Robert Miller working alongside Lucas's men during the day and returning to the ranch house each night to be with his wife and children. The shared crisis had created a bond between the families that transcended their different backgrounds. Catherine's pregnancy advanced, her condition becoming more pronounced as summer approached. Yet instead of feeling increasingly limited, she found herself more involved in ranch operations than ever. Lucas began teaching her the business side of cattle ranching, and she discovered a natural aptitude for organization and accounting that complemented his practical knowledge of the land and livestock. Their relationship evolved gradually, growing from mutual respect into something deeper. Lucas maintained a proper distance, mindful of Catherine's condition and her recent confrontation with David. But small gestures betrayed his feelings the way he always made sure she had the most comfortable chair. How he brought wildflowers he'd found while riding the range. His patient explanations of ranch operations that assumed her intelligence and interest. For her part, Katherine found herself increasingly drawn to the quiet rancher. His steadfast nature, his evident care for those under his protection, and his unexpected depth all combined to create a man unlike any she had known in Philadelphia society. They began taking evening walks around the ranch property when the heat of the day had passed, talking about their pasts, their hopes for Diamond Pitake's future, and eventually, more personal matters. "Did you ever think about having a family?" Katherine asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Before Albert left you the ranch, I mean." Lucas considered the question carefully, as he did all questions. Not seriously. Life was too uncertain, drifting from place to place, taking whatever work came along. Didn't seem fair to bring children into that. And now, his eyes met hers briefly. Now things are different. The simple statement held worlds of meaning that neither was quite ready to explore fully, but the possibility hung between them, sweet with promise. As Catherine's confinement approached, Martha began staying at the ranch full-time, her husband joining her on Sundays to hold small services in the main house for the ranch hands and neighboring settlers. The Reverend Thornton was a kindly man who accepted Catherine's unconventional situation without judgment, and his weekly presence brought a sense of normalcy and community that she found deeply comforting. Rebecca Wilson became a frequent visitor as well, often bringing supplies from town and staying overnight. Her friendship was a balm to Katherine, who had feared isolation in her new home, but instead found herself surrounded by people who accepted her just as she was. It was Rebecca who first noticed when Catherine's labor began, one warm June morning as they sorted through baby clothes that Martha and other women from town had contributed. "Katherine, how long have you been having those pains?" Rebecca asked, observing how Katherine paused and pressed a hand to her lower back for the third time in 20 minutes. "Just since breakfast," Katherine admitted. "I thought it was false labor again." Rebecca's eyes widened. "How far apart are they?" Katherine realized she hadn't been keeping track. "I'm not sure. Perhaps 15 minutes. I'm getting Martha," Rebecca decided, hurrying from the room. Events moved quickly after that. Martha took charge with calm efficiency, sending one of the hands to fetch the midwife from town, while preparing the bedroom with Rebecca's help. Lucas, upon being informed that the baby was coming, displayed a mixture of concern and helplessness that would have been comical under other circumstances. "Is there anything I can do?" he asked Martha, hovering in the hallway outside Catherine's room. "Yes," Martha replied firmly. "Stay out of the way and keep the men occupied. Birth is women's business." Reluctantly, Lucas retreated, but not before catching Catherine's eye through the doorway. "I'll be close," he promised, "if you need anything at all." The labor progressed steadily throughout the day and into the evening. Mrs. Peterson, the midwife, arrived mid-afternoon and pronounced everything proceeding normally, though she warned Katherine, It might be a long night for a first child. Katherine endured the increasing pain with as much grace as she could muster, drawing strength from the supportive women around her and, somehow, from the knowledge that Lucas was nearby, keeping vigil in his own way. As midnight approached, the pains intensified dramatically. Mrs. Peterson announced that it was nearly time, positioning Katherine for the final stage of labor. "You're doing beautifully," she encouraged as Katherine panted through contractions that now came relentlessly. "The baby's head is right there. A few more good pushes should do it." Katherine had never imagined such pain was possible, nor such determination to see it through. With Martha supporting her back and Rebecca holding her hand, she bore down with all her strength, focusing on the thought of finally meeting the child she had crossed a continent to protect. "That's it," Mrs. Peterson exclaimed. "The head is out. One more push, Katherine." With a final, overwhelming effort, Katherine felt her child slide into the world. A moment of silence, then a lusty cry filled the room. "A boy," Mrs. Peterson announced triumphantly. "A fine, healthy boy." Tears streamed down Katherine's face as the midwife placed the squalling infant on her chest. He was red-faced and indignant, with a shock of dark hair and tiny, perfect features. "Hello, little one," she whispered, overwhelmed by a love more powerful than anything she had ever experienced. "Welcome to the world." As Mrs. Peterson and Martha attended to the final stages of the birth, Rebecca slipped from the room. She returned moments later with a surprising report. "Lucas hasn't left the hallway all night," she said with a smile. "He's out there now, pacing like an expectant father." "Can I tell him the news?" Katherine hesitated only briefly. "Yes, and ask him to come in if he wishes." A few minutes later, after Katherine had been made presentable and the baby wrapped in a soft blanket, Lucas appeared in the doorway. He looked haggard with worry, his usual composure replaced by an expression of awe as he took in the scene before him. "A boy," Katherine said softly, cradling her son. 7 pounds, according to Mrs. Peterson. Lucas approached slowly, as if afraid he might somehow disturb the miracle before him. "He's perfect," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Congratulations, Katherine. Would you like to hold him?" The offer surprised even herself. Lucas looked startled. That is, I don't know how." "It's not difficult," Katherine assured him, gently transferring the bundled infant. "Support his head like this." With extreme care, Lucas cradled the newborn, his large, calloused hands incredibly gentle as they held the tiny form. The baby's eyes opened briefly, dark blue and unfocused, before closing again in contentment. "He trusts you," Katherine observed, touched by the tenderness in Lucas's expression. "Smart boy," Lucas murmured. "Knows his family when he sees it." The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with meaning. Katherine felt tears well up again, overwhelmed by the events of the night and the emotions they had unleashed. Lucas carefully returned the baby to her arms. "You should rest now, both of you." He hesitated, then added, "Does he have a name?" Katherine looked down at her son's peaceful face. "Albert Lucas Reed," she said softly. "After 2 good men who changed our lives." Something flashed in Lucas's eyes, surprise, followed by deep emotion he quickly masked. "That's a fine name. A name to be proud of." "I think so," Katherine agreed. The exhaustion of the long labor was finally catching up to her, making her eyelids heavy. Lucas noticed immediately. "Sleep now," he said gently. "I'll be nearby if you need anything." As he turned to leave, Katherine called softly after him. "Lucas," he paused in the doorway, looking back. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." His smile was brief but genuine. "Sleep well, Katherine." The next few weeks passed in a blur of exhaustion and joy as Katherine adjusted to motherhood. Baby Albert called Bertie by everyone except Lucas, who insisted on using the child's full name, proved to be a generally content infant with a healthy appetite and lusty lungs when displeased. Lucas's attitude toward the baby fascinated Katherine. He maintained a respectful distance, never presuming but always available when needed. He built a cradle with his own hands, working late into the night to have it ready when Katherine moved back to her room from the birthing chamber. He ensured the ranch hands kept quiet near the house during Bertie's nap times. And occasionally, when he thought no one was watching, he would stand over the cradle with an expression of wonder that made Katherine's heart ache with tenderness. One evening in late July, with Bertie finally asleep after a fussy day, Katherine joined Lucas on the porch. The summer heat lingered even as dusk approached, but a gentle breeze made the temperature bearable. "You look tired," Lucas observed, rising to offer her the more comfortable chair. "Bertie's been restless today," she explained, gratefully sinking into the seat. "I think he's growing again. His appetite is enormous." "Strong boy," Lucas said approvingly. "Going to be tall, I expect." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as the sunset painted the desert in hues of gold and purple. Katherine found herself studying Lucas's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the tiny wrinkles at the corners of his eyes that deepened when he smiled. He had become so dear to her, this quiet, steadfast man who asked for nothing yet gave everything. "I've been thinking," she said finally, "about the future." Lucas turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral. "What about it? Bertie will be walking before we know it, talking. Growing up," she smiled at the thought. "He'll need space to run, to learn, to become the man he's meant to be." "Diamond P has plenty of space," Lucas observed. "Yes, it does." Katherine gathered her courage. "What it doesn't have is a proper family structure. A mother and a father together, raising their child." Lucas went very still. "Katherine, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've come to care for you, Lucas, deeply." The words came more easily than she had expected. "And I believe you care for me too, for us." For a long moment he said nothing, his expression unreadable in the fading light. Then, slowly, he reached across the space between them and took her hand in his. "Since the day you arrived," he said quietly, "but I never thought. That is, with everything you've been through, I didn't want to presume." Katherine squeezed his hand. "You've never presumed anything, Lucas. You've been patient and kind and respectful. But sometimes a woman appreciates being presumed upon just a little." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I'll remember that." His expression grew serious again. "Are you sure, Katherine? I'm not a wealthy man apart from the ranch. I don't have education or social position." "I've had all those things," she reminded him. "They didn't bring happiness or security. What you offer is far more valuable: honesty, integrity, steadfastness. Those are the qualities I want in a father for my son, in a husband for myself." Lucas's hand tightened around hers. "I'd be honored to be both if you'll have me." "Is that a proposal, Mr. Yates?" Katherine teased gently. Lucas rose from his chair, still holding her hand, and to her astonishment, lowered himself to one knee before her. "Katherine Reed," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I'm not a man of fancy words, but I love you. I love your son as if he were my own. And I promise to spend every day of my life protecting and caring for both of you, if you'll do me the honor of becoming my wife." Tears welled in Katherine's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Lucas rose, drawing her to her feet with him, and with infinite gentleness kissed her for the first time. It was a brief kiss, sweet and almost tentative, but it held the promise of a lifetime. From inside the house came the sound of Bertie's cry, as if the infant somehow sensed the momentous occasion. Katherine laughed softly. "Duty calls." "Go to him," Lucas said. "I'll be here." The The simple promise meant everything. Katherine and Lucas were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the ranch house. Reverend Thornton officiated with Martha, Rebecca, and the Millers in attendance, along with the ranch hands and a few townspeople who had become friends. Bertie, dressed in a christening gown made from one of Martha's fine linen tablecloths, slept peacefully in a basket throughout the proceedings. Katherine wore a simple blue dress that Rebecca had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Lucas wore the only suit he owned, looking handsome if somewhat uncomfortable in the formal attire. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When Reverend Thornton pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed his bride with a tenderness that brought tears to many eyes, including his own. The celebration afterward was a true Western affair, with a feast prepared by Martha and the other women, music provided by 2 ranch hands who played fiddle and harmonica, and dancing that lasted well into the night. Katherine, despite having given birth just 6 weeks earlier, danced several reels with her new husband, her face flushed with happiness and exertion. "Mrs. Yates," Lucas murmured as they finally took a break, standing together on the porch away from the festivities. "How does it sound?" "Perfect," Katherine replied, leaning into his embrace. "Absolutely perfect." Later that night, after the guests had departed and Bertie had been fed and settled in his cradle, Katherine joined Lucas in what was now their shared bedroom. The awkwardness she had feared didn't materialize. They came together with a naturalness that felt like coming home, their bodies learning each other with the same patience and care that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. Afterward, lying in Lucas's arms as moonlight filtered through the curtains, Katherine felt a contentment she had never imagined possible when she'd first set out from Philadelphia, pregnant and alone. "Happy?" Lucas asked softly, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Completely," she assured him. "And you, more than I ever thought possible." He kissed her forehead. "I never expected this, you know. When Albert asked me to meet you that day, I thought I'd just be delivering bad news, maybe helping you find a way back east. And instead you found a wife and son," Katherine marveled. "Life takes unexpected turns." "The best kind," Lucas agreed. "Though I still miss Albert. He would have been pleased, I think, to see how things worked out." "I think so too," Katherine said softly. "I wish I could have known him." "You would have liked each other." Lucas's voice grew thoughtful. "He always said Diamond P was meant to be a family ranch. Guess he got his wish, just not the way he planned." Katherine snuggled closer, cherishing the solid warmth of her husband's body next to hers. "We'll make him proud. Build the ranch into something even greater for Bertie and any other children who might come along." Lucas's arm tightened around her. "Other children," she smiled against his chest. "Eventually, if you're agreeable." His laugh rumbled beneath her ear. "Very agreeable, Mrs. Yates." "Very agreeable indeed." 3 years later, Katherine stood on the porch of the expanded ranch house, watching as Lucas taught Bertie to sit on a gentle pony. The little boy, now a sturdy 3-year-old with his mother's auburn hair and a personality that combined her determination with Lucas's quiet strength, laughed delightedly as the pony took a few careful steps under Lucas's guidance. "Careful with your brother, Albert Lucas," Katherine called. "He's watching everything you do." In her arms, 1-year-old Thomas Edward Yates observed the proceedings with solemn interest, his blue eyes so like his father's, missing nothing. Lucas looked up with a smile that still had the power to make Katherine's heart skip. "He's a natural, just like his mama. Remember how you took to riding once you gave it a chance?" Katherine laughed. "I remember being terrified and trying not to show it. And now you outride half the hands," Lucas said proudly. "Speaking of which, Johnson's bringing that new stallion by this afternoon. Thought you might want to take a look, see if he's worth the investment." The casual way he included her in ranch decisions never failed to warm Katherine's heart. From the beginning of their marriage, Lucas had treated her as a full partner in Diamond P, valuing her opinions and business acumen. Together, they had expanded the ranch's operations, improving the breeding stock and increasing profits year over year. The ranch itself had grown as well. Lucas had added a wing to the house after Thomas's birth, including a proper library, as Albert Prescott had once envisioned. The bunkhouse had been expanded to accommodate more hands, and a small schoolhouse now stood near the main house, where Rebecca Wilson taught Bertie and the children of nearby ranches 3 days a week. Old Tucson had grown too, becoming a respectable town with a proper hotel, a bank, and even a small opera house where traveling companies sometimes performed. Katherine had helped establish a ladies' aid society that provided assistance to new settlers and maintained the small town cemetery where Albert Prescott rested beneath a handsome stone that read "Founder of Diamond P Ranch, Friend and Benefactor." "Mama, look!" Bertie called excitedly as the pony took a few steps on its own, Lucas still holding the lead rope but giving the boy the illusion of independence. "I'm riding by myself." "Wonderful, sweetheart," Katherine called back, bouncing Thomas gently as he began to fuss. "You'll be helping your papa with the cattle drive before we know it." Lucas shot her a mock-alarmed look that made her laugh. Their son was still far too young for such responsibilities, but his fascination with ranch life was evident in everything he did. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the ranch yard, Katherine reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The frightened, desperate woman who had arrived on the stagecoach 4 years ago, pregnant and alone, would scarcely recognize the contented rancher's wife she had become. The Philadelphia socialite, who had once considered Arizona territory a savage wilderness, now couldn't imagine living anywhere else. Lucas completed Bertie's riding lesson and lifted the boy from the pony, settling him on broad shoulders that had become the little boy's favorite perch. They approached the porch, both wearing identical expressions of satisfaction. "Successful lesson?" Katherine asked, shifting Thomas to her hip as he began to squirm. "Very," Lucas confirmed. "We have a natural horseman here." "Like his papa," Bertie declared proudly. Lucas's eyes met Katherine's over their son's head, a wealth of love and shared history in that simple glance. "Dinner should be ready soon," she said. "Martha's made your favorite stew, Bertie." "With dumplings?" the boy asked hopefully. "Of course with dumplings," Lucas assured him, swinging him down from his shoulders. "Go wash up now, partner. Can't come to the table with hands that have been patting ponies." As Bertie scampered inside, Lucas moved closer to Katherine, placing an arm around her waist and dropping a kiss on Thomas's dark head. "Happy?" he asked softly, an echo of the question he'd asked on their wedding night. Katherine leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid strength that had become her foundation. "Completely," she assured him. "This life, this family, it's more than I ever dared hope for." Lucas's arm tightened around her as they gazed out over the ranch property together, watching as the setting sun turned the desert to gold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Yates," he murmured, words he had spoken every day since their wedding, a reminder of the unexpected journey that had brought them together. "Home," Katherine agreed, the word filled with all the meaning, all the love, all the belonging she had found in this once alien territory. "The only place I ever want to be."